The reason Marc Emery is here and speaking today is because he's had the courage to say it's wrong for a long time now. He said it as loud as he can and in as many ways as he thinks he can. And his reward for doing that is that the United States government said we've got to squash this guy because he's making real inroads in the marijuana legalization movement. And that's why it's important for every one of us here to do what we can to support Marc now. He's got huge legal bills, and also there's a surprising thing that a small number of letters from concerned citizens to our politicians will make a large difference. If I can talk everyone here into making a commitment, into writing 2 letters from Marc over the course of the next 3 months, that will make a huge difference in how our government treats the man. Because basically our government is a coward. They'll step on us as long as we let them, but as soon as we show that we have some backbone, they'll turn tail and run. And this is a case where we have to work to help Marc out here, because he's been helping us out for a long time. And I want him to come up here and tell us a little bit about what's going on right now and what he thinks is happening. And thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you. I want to point out that although, oftentimes we'll say, do you ever think, that's the most common question I get, do you think pot's going to be legal one day? And optimistically, I'd like to think it would be. But the important thing is, even if it is never legal, or if it is legal, we're going to have this struggle all our life. If you're ever thinking that one day we won't be fighting this fight to make marijuana legal, or to make it so that we, the marijuana people, don't go to jail for our love of the plant, which is really the issue. People don't like the word legalization. Just say, I just don't want anybody to go to jail. Do you agree with that? No one should go to jail for marijuana. Well, we're always going to have this fight. Because even if we make marijuana legal, there'll be somebody next day wanting to make it criminal again, some tyrant. Because remember, why is it that marijuana people are sought after? Why are we put in jail? There'll be about 70,000 arrests this year for cultivation, possession, and selling marijuana in Canada. That's pretty fantastic. 70,000 individuals every year since 1970 or so. So now we're entering into the almost 2 million people charged in the space of 35 years. 2 million people. Millions and millions of dollars of resources, hundreds of thousands of police officers, jailers, lawyers, court officials required to administrate 2 to 3 generations of injustice that has no explanation. Like, for example, why are the pot people? Pot people aren't violent, not like the alcohol people. We don't do crazy schizo things, despite what recent reports say about psychosis and schizophrenia. You go to the prescription drug people, those are the people that are acting weird on all these antidepressants, killing themselves. They don't tell you that. The more you take antidepressants, the more likely you are to commit suicide. The more likely you are to have, if you take steroids to kill someone, look at that. Now, they're illegal, but they're a much lower schedule than marijuana. Marijuana is more harmful than steroids that are known to kill people in steroid abuse, right? And every single legal substance that's out there on the market, sugar is the #1 killer in North America, the #1 cause of obesity, but we can overdose on as much sugar as we like, and nobody from 7-Eleven will ever get charged. Nobody's going to be responsible for that. No one is ever going to hold the rap for selling you all that sugar, all those prescription drugs, all that alcohol. You can have a house full of alcohol. Maybe some of you do. But you can have a house full of tobacco. None of that's illegal. You could load yourself up with guns. That's not illegal. You can load yourself up with cars that kill people. Every single thing in society is more dangerous than marijuana. Even government-approved water killed 9 people in Walkerton, Ontario. So even the water you drink is going to kill you more likely than marijuana. And water will more likely hurt you than marijuana. I recently have been doing a number of interviews on whether marijuana causes psychosis. And I think that's weird. There's 5 million Canadians smoking marijuana. Why don't you look around and see if anybody's got psychosis? Right? They haven't actually found a single person in Canada with psychosis as a result of marijuana, but they'll promote and trumpet these studies that show that, God, goodness knows, your teenage son is going to develop psychotic fits tomorrow. Now, here's what I tell people. First of all, not only is there not any evidence of psychosis anywhere, nobody can find anybody like that. We have 5 million pot smokers in Canada. By the way, this official UN survey said 16.6% of Canadians smoke marijuana. What I find fantastic, and I find that a very good statistic too, is that that's the people who told a potent stranger they smoke marijuana. If I got a phone call and said, you smoke pot, I'd be thinking, as a man who's been arrested 22 times, I shouldn't answer this. Right? And so you have 60% of the Canadian public actually admitted they smoke pot. I would think then it's probably 20 or 25%, because I know some paranoid pot smokers, and they're not admitting to any strange drug smoke weed, especially if they grow pot. If you grow pot, you get that phone call. No, I'm totally against pot, right? And so I bet it's like 20 to 25%, and just 16.6% admitted to it, which is pretty fantastic. That means 1 in every 5 people you know, or at least at the very least 1 every 6. Every 1 of every 6 cops, bus drivers, teachers, lawyers, people on the street, people who serve you at 7-Eleven, people in every walk of life or sphere of existence, 1 out of 6 of those people is a chronic pothead. And so you have to figure we have infiltrated every aspect of society. I mean, I've seen cops recently be arrested who are potheads. I've seen many teachers being kicked out of teaching positions because they offered a joint to their student at a concert, or they were known to smoke pot, or they talked about smoking pot. I've seen professors fired when their grow-up was discovered in their basement. I've seen every person of every walk of life at some point or another accused of smoking, possessing, or growing marijuana. We're all doing it. And exactly what is our crime? Like, what are we doing that poses such a threat? I mean, after all, the alcohol people don't get arrested, and we know they kill people by the tens of thousands in this country every year. 40,000 people die from tobacco, lung cancer. And the weird thing is, if you smoke pot, you will never get lung cancer. No one who ever smokes pot has ever gotten lung cancer. No one who ever smoked pot has ever gotten Alzheimer's. It's the greatest suppressed bit of information that goes on. They're trying to tell you in every major media today that somehow there's a small fractional increase in the likelihood that you will become schizophrenic or psychotic if you smoke pot. Just a tiny fractional thing, maybe 40% more likely to get schizophrenia than you would if you were already predisposed to it. So in other words, if you're going to get schizophrenia anyway and you smoke pot, you might have a 40% greater chance of having more psychotic episodes. Well, that excludes probably everybody in this room. I've never had a psychotic episode, and I've smoked every day, probably more pot than any human alive, and for 27 years. And I don't know, you can ask my wife later, has he ever had any psychotic episodes? No, it's not about our health. Nobody gives a goddamn about your health. Anybody who's using these studies to show how marijuana is harmful isn't concerned about your health because they want to jail you. And I'll get to why while they seek us down and hunt us down like dogs, okay? Because you have to understand, 27 million people on this planet in the last 50 years, since 1956, have been arrested for pot. 6 million of those 27 million spent significant amounts of time in jail. So now we've got a worldwide pogrom as great or fantastic as anything ever done against any other groups. I mean, very few people of a similar culture like ours, we're the cannabis culture, 27 million people in the cannabis culture in the space of 50 years, in this modern era, the so-called enlightened era, have been arrested, and 6 million of us have been jailed for extended periods of time. That is fantastic. That is bigger than any other kind of roundup of any other kind in the modern era, except of perhaps Jews, Gypsies, and Rwandans. There are no other groups who've been targeted for cultural destruction like we have. And in such a reliable way, in every place on earth, every country on earth hunts down the marijuana people like dogs, like animals, cages us, even murders us. You know, the death penalty exists for marijuana in 20 countries on earth, and they enforce it. In places like China and Vietnam and Indonesia, Chappelle Corby gets 15 years as a tourist for bringing marijuana to Indonesia. I myself facing life imprisonment without parole, hundreds of years in jail because I sent seeds across an invisible line to consenting adults in America. And the interesting thing about my case is that it's not even about harm. Nobody's even claiming that I did anything wrong to them. It's all about ideology. And ideology is at the core of our problem. There's an ideology out there that wants to exterminate us, to destroy us as a culture, because their ideology, Christian religious ideology, Islamic religious ideology, their ideology of politics, of government control, of control of the people, those ideologies are the reason we are hunted down like dogs. Not because we're a threat to our neighbor, of course we're not. Marijuana people have produced all the greatest things this world has. Stephen Jobs of Apple Computers, that everybody's carrying around an iPhone or has an iPod these days. Hey, thank that pot-smoking Stephen Jobs, who developed that after a big chonger, right? And his partner, Steve Wozniak, is still a pot smoker. Bill Gates was a totally chronic pothead when he developed Microsoft and the operating systems that come from him. You look at the pictures of Bill Gates, you can see he's a total head. His eyes are all. But none of that, his partner, Paul Allen, is still chronic. Okay, these are the people that bought us the 2 greatest platforms and methods of communicating in the modern era. Totally thanks to the visionary